Okay. Uh, my hernia was acting up rather drastically last night and this morning, so I'm a little out of it, a little less energetic than I was yesterday. It is what it is. Just gonna have to live with it. But I want to get through this, and now my hernia is acted up, settled enough that, like, an ibuprofen can handle the pain. So we're gonna get back into it. Because we're only about halfway through. Turns out there's 5 chapters plus conclusion, so we are exactly halfway through that chapter, through chapter 3. So we are like literally at the halfway point. So let's get going. If you are here for me, yay. I have these waters that I'm afraid are going to fall over, and I need to reposition them. Okay. Papa. I think that's good. Whew. Alright. So previously we saw the opening introduction where the Pope raised concerns over AI. Then we saw an outline history of the development of the church's sort of policies of social justice. We had an outline on them. We had our criticisms, kind of the standard stuff. Hi, you're undermining yourself by defining life as beginning at conception rather than at birth. I think they have a naive perspective of subsidiarity that ultimately permits special interests to hijack their process and undermines their long-term goals of providing welfare for all. And I think they have an over-dependence upon the concept of charity, which we all know is not consistent, not reliable, and tends to evaporate in hard times, which is when it is needed the most. So, criticisms and concerns. And then we hit the actual AI section. And what we hit so far is the Pope presenting what he is concerned about, the new thing, as he calls it. The Reus Novum of AI. And we've seen that the Pope is, at least for the purposes of this encyclical, taking the AI hype at face value. And we have our concerns about that. You know, we work in the field. We know how that's not quite a thing that exists. But, the Pope is taking them at face value there for the purposes of his encyclical, and I suppose that's not actually that bad a position. Since yesterday, while I was laying in bed in pain, the Vatican released infographics for this. I was tempted to pull them up, but because there's so much left to go through, I don't think I will. And instead I'll try and drop them after. And we left off here at this section called What Must Not Be Lost, which I imagine is going to be outlining the things that at least the pontiff of the Catholic Church views as being under attack, and so that he can consider what needs to be done to not have that. Because it does sound like he's perhaps not being as mean as he should be about AI and is sort of permitting it to be a thing that is permitting it to be a thing that may exist. Something. So, yeah. that's that. Reminder for the posterity, anyone who stumbles upon this in the future, my biases: I am a left-leaning, ex-Christian trans woman. I am not a Catholic. I have some previously stated issues with Christianity from a theological perspective, but I don't think any of that is really that relevant to the situation at hand. Like, what the Pope is saying, for the most part, stands on its own and is not explicitly dependent upon you believing in this particular theological points of Christianity for you to grant the Pope's argument. You simply need to grant the assertion that humanity has inherent dignity, and humans are inherently, not as a product of their successes, but innately deserving of respect and dignity. If you grant those assumptions, which I do, I think those are the only bits that the justification that the Pope provides comes from Scripture. Everything else arises from there. Now, he does reference a lot of previous papal encyclicals by previous popes back about a century and a half. But, well, and I have not, and probably will never read all those encyclicals, so maybe there's a bunch of theological stuff buried in those, but thus far, we are able to treat the Church's stance on social justice as a model for interacting with society, and it's, for a most part, with the aforementioned asterisks on their sort of naive subsidiarity and sort of the... how do I want to phrase it? There's lots of little theological, religious stances that the Church takes, which are reiterated here, that undermine their goals, their stated goals of... I'm sort of putting words in the Church's mouth here, but not really. I'm just kind of shortening what they say. De-instrumentalizing humanity. Because they make certain statements that, in practice, instrumentalize women. And of course, there's the ongoing fact that the trans community is, in the US especially, subject to the Catholic Church's whims, even if we're not Catholic. Because in a great many parts of the United States, the hospitals that provide care to the impoverished, of which trans women are disproportionately impoverished, and trans men as well to a lesser extent, are that those hospitals will deny care to transgender persons, and that causes a consistent material harm. And I do believe that the naive view of subsidiarity presented by the Church, or by the Pope, in this article will reinforce that when it should not. We're not here for what Barb has to say. We're not here for the Grand Goblin. We're here for what the Pope has to say. We're going to try and read it in the best faith we can. If we have something that makes us mad, we're going to try and take a deep breath and try to think, what could they be saying that is more defensible? And we're going to try and come out with a broader, more critical appreciation of the work and the issue. In general, I feel thus far the Pope has not been aggressive enough in an anti-AI stance for someone who claims to value human dignity. But we're also only halfway through. And there's plenty of opportunity for the Pope to become meaner. Well, not meaner. I don't think the Pope's going to actually be mean. That's kind of non-popey. But take a firmer stance. I also have not yet noticed the Gandalf quote. Allegedly, he quotes Gandalf in here. I haven't seen it yet, but I also haven't read Lord of the Rings in like 30 years, so I may have just missed it. Without further ado, Chapter 2, section, or Chapter 3, section whatever this is, of Magnifica Humanitas. What must not be lost. Having considered the issues of responsibility and governance of AI, we must now return to our central question. What does it mean to safeguard our humanity? The risk extends beyond the misuse of certain technologies. More gravely, the pervasive technocratic paradigm in which we are immersed, and that is amplified by the digital revolution and AI, threatens to normalize an anti-human vision. In that vision, the fullness of life is equated with having more, reducing weakness, eliminating uncertainty, and exerting total control. When efficiency becomes the ultimate measure of value, human beings are tempted to see themselves as a project to be optimized, rather than as persons called to relationships and communion. In reality, elevating any single dimension of human existence to an absolute is always a mistake. Indeed, disorder does not arise only from scarcity. Even unchecked growth can give rise to impoverishment. And an ecosystem balance is disrupted when one species expands at the expense of others. In human life, something similar occurs when one faculty claims to be the measure of everything. Thus, intelligence, when absolutized, overshadows other essential dimensions of life, such as affection, the will, commitment, and relationships. Similarly, technical power, if left unbalanced, does not make us more capable. It makes us more isolated and more vulnerable to being dominated and excluded. The critical point does not oppose intelligence, but serves as a reminder that when intelligence becomes self-referential, its true purpose of serving life and the human person is lost. The quality of a civilization is measured not by the power of its means, but by the care it's able to offer, by its ability to recognize the other as a face, not merely as a function. The ability to care for one another is a fundamental dimension of our humanity, one that is learned and mastered through lived experience. Reading stories to a child, offering company to an elderly person, and arranging a home so it is welcoming are simple gestures often rooted in family life. They teach us to value care at the societal level and train us to recognize others as persons worthy of attention. Technology can also support this mutual care between people, for example, by providing tools that help us anticipate and organize things, without undermining human freedom and judgment. After all, human beings are the subjects of relationships and responsible for their own decisions. Hydrate. Wow. But what if I'd rather dihydrate? I'm gonna make that joke probably at least 2 more times before I'm sick of it. I've hydrated. Rawr. Underlining narratives, transhumanism, and posthumanism. I look forward to seeing these ideas butchered, because transhumanism and posthumanism are ideas that just are so often butchered by basically everyone, to the point that I'm starting to think that the terms themselves are no longer meaningful. Like, to a certain extent, the idea is that as technology advances, as we obtain a broader capability in computing, in biotechnology, in machinery, in biochemical, etc. There's a word there missing that's probably important, but I hope you catch my meaning, even if I have dropped it. Then, in a sense of extreme, like, bodily autonomy, we should be able to interface with technology so that the technology becomes a part of us, and it expands and manifests us beyond the limitations of our being. Like, that's the extent of it. But to a certain extent, gender transition is a sort of transhumanist operation. We have an image of ourselves that is more than the shell to which we are assigned, the role we are assigned, and we exploit certain technologies, be they legal technologies, social technologies, linguistic technologies, chemical or even surgical technologies, to shift the role from one where we have been assigned to one where we feel that we are comfortable and may flourish more fully as people. And in a similar sense, like, to a certain extent, the omnipresence of the cell phone becomes an technological augmentation of our mind and our communication. The ability to interface with someone thousands of miles away in a deep and meaningful manner, when before there would be no way to do so. And that, in a certain sense, transcends humanity, but also reinforces it. Right? I don't think the image of humanity presented in this encyclical thus far is in conflict with transhumanism and posthumanism per se, but they are definitely in contrast with the capitalist presentations of transhumanism and posthumanism that are popular amongst the tech elite. And those are, I anticipate, going to be the categories that are explicitly referenced and probably treated as what those terms are. So, yeah. An optimistic thing has once again been seized by capital, corrupted, twisted, and destroyed. And now its corpse is getting picked apart by the Catholic Church. It's okay. He's just not going to be willing to see beyond. I doubt he's going to see beyond the monster that hobbles before him under the name of transhumanism, to see the entity behind it that truly causes the nightmare. I think that the power incentives are going to prevent that. But I look forward to being surprised. It might be. I shouldn't be putting words in front of the mouth. I just want to express a priori my expectations, and then we can read it and we can go, ooh, my expectations were broken. And if my expectations are then coloring what I read in ways that perhaps they should not be, then whoever is watching this can go, hey, you're letting your expectations cause you to misread what you're seeing. Because that's a thing that can happen. And yay, that's part of why we make it explicit. We're trying to be intellectually honest and broad-based here and read it critically but affirmatively. If that makes sense. Like, we want to give it the best chance, but we also want to poke at it. Being a leftist is hard. In an attempt to shed light on the cultural assumptions accompanying the ongoing digital revolution, I'd like to turn our attention to certain currents of thought that interpret progress as surpassing the human condition, which are often grouped under the labels of transhumanism and posthumanism. These perspectives form the ideological background present in some centers of technological power, and occupy the collective imagination in a simplified form, especially in the media and on social networks. They tend to foster enthusiasm for new technologies through a futuristic vision of an enhanced human being or a human-machine hybrid. Transhumanism and posthumanism encompass a range of currents and sensibilities, making it difficult to define them in a single, unambiguous way. Okay, he is noticing that, at least the variety. They can be likened to an archipelago of conceptual islands, distinct yet connected by a common sea of assumptions, namely the central role of technology and the aspiration to transcend the limits of the human condition. In general, transhumanism envisions the enhancement of human beings through technology, such as biomedicine, body engineering, devices, and algorithms, with the aim of increasing performance and capabilities. Posthumanism, especially in its more radical forms, goes further. It challenges anthropocentrism and envisions a hybridization of human beings, machines, and the environment, even anticipating a threshold where humanity surpasses itself in a new evolutionary stage. Even when such ideas remain largely speculative, they gain relevance by altering the collective imagination and influence social, economic, and political choices. From the perspective of the Church's social doctrine, the key issue is not the use of technology, but the vision that underlies it. If human being is treated as something to be perfected or surpassed, it becomes easier to accept that some lives are less useful, less desirable, or less worthy. In the name of progress, necessary sacrifices may begin to be justified, placing the burden on the most vulnerable in pursuit of a supposed optimization of the species. In this regard, the aforementioned warning of St. Paul VI retains great foresight. Scientific and technological advances, when detached from moral and social progress, end up turning against humanity. For this reason, a clear distinction must be made. It is one thing to integrate technology within a human-centered relational vision. It's another to be guided by an outlook that devalues human limits and promises a purely technical form of salvation. The limit, heart, and grandeur of the human person. Our relationship with life seems to be in crisis today. Everything that appears as a limit, incapacity, illness, old age, suffering, vulnerability, tends to be seen primarily as a defect to be corrected, rather than a reality through which our humanity matures and opens itself to relationship. Yet, we must remember that humanity flourishes not despite limitations, but often through them. The light of faith offers a perspective on reality that helps us recognize what we call the contingency of the things in the world. While it is right to strive to alleviate the suffering that marks human life, it is also wise to acknowledge our fundamental finitude, knowing that religious experience, and in particular Christian faith, propose we live, without oversimplification, this ambivalence between human greatness and limitation, interpreting it in the light of our original and fundamental relationship with God. It is precisely within our limitations that the following find a place: compassion, as well as a sincere connection to the needs of others, a generosity that can emerge even in the midst of darkness and failure, spiritual experience in the worship of God. We see this at many moments when our lives become tangible, when we face rejection, when we suffer the illness or loss of a loved one, when we encounter our own weakness or failure. Mysteriously, it is precisely in such moments that we can discover a new wisdom, tangibly experience the closeness of others, and encounter the presence of God. So far, pretty okay. Not a Christian, but yeah, so far, yeah. Hernia is starting to act up again. Am I only going to get 20 minutes today of not having the pain? We're going to push and we're going to see if we can get anywhere, but I don't like the way it is starting to go back again. I just want to read this. And when limitations are experienced, inner suffering, human wisdom teaches us not to deny or suppress it, but to integrate it. To eliminate suffering entirely would mean, in the end, extinguishing love and desire as well. Those who love and desire cannot avoid passing through trial and suffering. And over the years we carry within us lessons that leave their mark like scars. The memories of a journey shaped by freedom and failure, dreams and disappointments. And it's only thanks to the interplay of these elements that the wonders of the soul occur within us, allowing us to sense the richness of our humanity. To renounce this adventure, both tragic and splendid, in the name of a presumed transcendence of all limits, could mean many things, but would no longer be human. The moral corruption of our limitations has created beings, namely the evil that clearly agitates the human heart, ruins society and life, at times reaching extreme forms of inhumanity. Yet even these painful expressions of our limitations leave openings for the good. Even when persons dehumanize themselves and bring about tragedy, a small light continues to shine within humanity, one that can be rekindled, along paths of conversion and reconciliation. As Viktor Frankl observed in Moments of Horror, we've come to know man as he really is. After all, man is that being who invented the gas chambers of Auschwitz. However, he's also that being who entered those gas chambers upright with the Lord's Prayer or the Shema Yisrael on his lips. I'm going to try going to the bathroom and see if this fixes things. Otherwise, we may have to stop abruptly. BRB.